So I just want to start out by saying thank you to everyone who put this together and for inviting me to the panel. I feel very honored to be here with the superstars of agroforestry and silvopasture all in one room. I don't consider myself a superstar yet, but I strive to be one. And I think what I'd love to share with you guys is just my context, my perspective, how I got here, from the standpoint of I come from a different lens. I think I come from a different lens than a lot of folks on how I got to this path and where I am at today, which is helping producers do designs for silvopasture and agroforestry. And I think what that helps me do is figure out how we can make silvopasture successful in growing it across the landscape and making it more of a form of, I'll call it mainstream agriculture for lack of a better word. So Savanna Institute, just a kind of a little briefing first of who I am. So like in the introduction, I have this business called the Parcel Planner. Years ago, I was doing a conservation plan of some sort for NRCS, and I was like, all I do is plans for parcels of land. I'm the parcel planner. That's what I am. I bet that would be a great business name. And I used it then. I used it when I actually launched something. And so I actually created this image of myself for my website. And so some of the things on here, all these things are true, but they're more in the context of advertising to an audience of folks who own land. They own land and they want to do something cool with it. They want to improve it for habitat for their particular goal, which is deer. And so that's more of my background originally, is doing habitat management and ecosystem restoration. But a lot of that overlaps, of course, with silvopasture. We're talking prescribed burns, we're talking trying to get trees to survive when we plant them, protecting them from deer, all the things that also in the context of silvopasture are important. And so then there's a picture of me looking really hardcore with my chainsaw gear on. And yes, I do run a chainsaw and I know how to cut down a tree and I wear all the proper PPE. But a huge component of my life is raising 3 children. And that also is a large component of who I am and where I'm at in my life right now. So the Savanna Institute, they are, their main home is Madison, Wisconsin, but we're birthed in Illinois, and we cover several states in the Midwest, not covering Missouri. We're not counting you as a Midwestern state. You guys got your own thing going on. But what we offer is, we call it a technical service program. And what that is if you're a landowner or you have access to land and you are interested in anything agroforestry, yes, you can apply to work with one of our 7 technical service providers across the Midwest. The service is free. Most of our funding comes from grants. We're a nonprofit, so we're not charging for our consultations. And if you're the right fit for what we're trying to do, we will walk you through an entire design. We'll generate that design for you, and we'll also connect you with resources, the most common funding resources being NRCS, but also the Nature Conservancy's EAP program. And so we kind of just, we hold your hand and we run the whole gamut. And this is just a little diagram of here's the process for how that would work. And so now I'm going to give you, I'm giving you a talk about Wisconsin silvopasture, snapshot. What do I see? And this is where I want to just give you a little lesson, a little geography lesson to start out with the state of Wisconsin. So we've got the aerial imagery, and I look at maps all the time. I can look at aerial imagery and I kind of know what's going on. And you guys probably do too as well. But the dark imagery in Wisconsin, that's all forest. And there's always a reason. There's a reason it's forest. It's too cold, it's too rocky, it's too wet, it's too sandy, could not be cultivated. So anything on here that's dark green is woods, and it's dark green for a reason, because nobody could really make a go of it farming it. And then you have all sorts of hodgepodge pockets, okay? And when I think of where does silvopasture work in Wisconsin, where just is it naturally gonna fit? And we're talking silvopasture by addition, right? We're talking like planting trees in fields. That's a crazy notion. I really strongly look towards the southwest part of the state, and you can see the ridges and the valleys there. What that means is that farming is restricted by the topography in the landscape. It cannot grow out. Huge mega fields are not possible, which means people who want to cultivate and grow things on that land have to get creative. It also means that the prices of land are not going to go skyrocket high as quickly as they have elsewhere, where you have big open landscapes with large farms and outbid the small guys. And just a little history in Wisconsin. You guys didn't know you're going to get a history and geography lesson for Wisconsin. But yes, we're known as a dairy state. I am not super well versed in exactly who all the settlers were and where they came from. But I'm fairly certain most of them came from places in Europe where they liked to have cows. And they came here and they're like, I'm going to do that same thing here because that's what I know. And so there were dairies everywhere. And they were on a small scale. And probably the numbers that people kept for cows were probably anywhere from 5 to 40. You know, that was very common up until probably like the 1950s. That's what the landscape was. And every single dot on here represents the numbers of cows in 1931. You can see it was distributed across the state. And you can also see that the northern part, there were hardly any, right? There's woods up there, so. Oh, my clicker's not going. Can you go to the next slide? And here's agriculture today. So not every dairy is 1,000 cows and not every, operation is 1,000 acres, but it's trending this way. If you have 1,000 cows, you're going to be over 1,000 animal units. You're going to be a CAFO farm. And that's more and more common. Next slide. So for about 10 years, I worked in the Green Bay area of Wisconsin, flatter landscape, historic settlers, everyone did dairy. And over time, it's progressed to something where this is the common scenario. And now your lesson is going to be, you guys are like, I came here for agroforestry. Why are you telling me about dairies? These systems have just produced mass efficiency. And so you've got a cow barn, you've got a heifer barn, you've got a young stock barn, you've got feed storage, you've got manure storage, you've got feed leachate treatment area. Everything in one site for mass efficiency. And so if you're a farm like this, then next slide, please. Then over time, you're going to gobble up the land. And so here we have a relatively small geographic area, maybe a couple Huck 12 watersheds. And you can imagine if you're somebody who owns land in this area, the economics of this area, the context of this area is going to make it challenging to plant trees as a primary product. And it's not likely that if you're one of the operators of these large dairies, that's going to be your major focus. Next slide, please. And so here we have a slide. There's a dairy on the right, and then you can see I zoomed in. I said, oh my goodness, they're applying dairy manure. And I wanted to show this context. Land values skyrocket up, especially because hauling manure is the most expensive thing for that operation. Their largest expense is going to be feed and hauling manure. And so that means anything that's close to the farm, the land rent prices, $300–400 an acre, maybe even more. Next slide, please. And because of the type of farming there, everything's big. It's big hay equipment, and there's lots of research on forages. Most of the universities are oriented towards doing research for this farming system. Next slide, please. And so I'm working with these big dairies in this context, and here's me out walking with a farmer, let's say, and here's the crazy idea that I have. But I don't think it's so crazy. Why not fence it off and graze cows? Because even in the context that I just showed you, there are still lots of gems. There are still lots of landowners and aspiring farmers where agroforestry, silvopasture makes sense. Next slide. So just to the north, you can see that dairy I showed you, and they're applying the manure. And I was telling you how expensive land is. And in this case, the pink rectangle, they went to managed grazing. They took it out of row crop. They went to managed grazing. In their context, it made sense. They have 80 acres. It doesn't make sense to go big and go home. It's not in the cards. and it doesn't fit their lifestyle. They want healthy soil, they want healthy livestock, they want to maintain that relationship to the land. Grazing fit for this individual, even though they could get a guaranteed income off leasing it to the neighbor or selling the feed to the neighbor. Next slide, please. But don't get too excited. Next slide. They already figured out a way to get shade. They don't need no stinking trees. So I think that's not to say that in this context, they would not get excited about trees ever, and that wouldn't eventually make sense. But they have a mobile shade. They have everybody in the neighborhood who's gonna make hay for them has huge equipment. Trees are going to get in the way. Next slide. And so I'm bumming you guys out. You're like, does Silvopasture even fit? Like, what are we talking about? And click the button. Yes, it works. Next slide. Oh, I wonder if this works now. So here's a snapshot of where things are in the state of Wisconsin. We do have 1 million acres of pasture land. We have cropland that should be in pasture land. And then the pasture land we do have, most of it needs to be improved. And so there's tremendous potential. Next slide, please. And also Wisconsin, I believe, is a leader in managed grazing for the country. And here's some little bullet points why I think that's the case. We have the largest grazing conference in the nation, I believe, coming up. And I've talked to several of you, the Grassworks Grazing Conference that's coming up. Just a huge wealth of knowledge and resources, networking opportunities everywhere. I think Organic Valley was birthed in that area. Again, there's lots of grass-fed dairies, there's lots of grass-fed beef operations. So we already have that context of the culture of grazing. Is it everywhere in the state? No. But those areas I showed you, yes. And there are even areas, even in big ag country, where there's grazing. It makes sense. Next slide, please. And so here we have Wisconsin. There you can see where it's dark green. What does dark green mean? Forest. And then what do all these dots mean? I'm giving you a little behind the scenes look, snapshot at Silvopasture. Anyone with those dots were people that contacted the Savanna Institute and said, hey, I want to play ball. I'm interested in Silvopasture. Next slide, please. So I'll give you some example of who I'm working with now and doing designs with. Here's a case type. We've got a small scale operation, family operation, where they're sandwiched in the context of the landscape. They have a small field, they want to feed their family, they want to grow a little bit of everything. This is a common situation I don't think is ever going to go away, and this is probably common all over the country. So small scale, subsistence, homesteading, niche market. Then we also have land trusts. So I was talking about, we have the steep ground that just you can't farm. And this is 20-foot intervals, I think, between the contour lines, super steep. So down below, we have this riverine system. We're talking about doing virtual fencing to manage the riverine system. Up top, we're talking about putting in Silvopasture to do oak savanna. Here we have different situation. The woods are on the top, the fields are on the bottom. This individual has a little over 100 acres. If they're going to make money in farming, they have to think outside the box. They are doing grazing, they're incorporating an orchard as well. They're stacking enterprises. Here we have another area in southwest Wisconsin. And we have the hills, the fields are more on the top of the hills, but this is an institutional client. They're institutional, they own farmland. They've owned it for 100 years or more. They want it to be regenerative. They want to look outside the box. They don't want to do the same old, same old. This is another example of a typical client. Here I've got somebody in the suburbs. They have markets all around them. They are a holdout. They're not selling to a subdivision. They want to keep the land in something productive, and this purpose of this would be community education and restoration. And then we do have dairies that right here is one that is in Cashton, Wisconsin, I believe, and he's installed trees, and what he wants is shade straight up. So that exists as well. That's still an existing context that we have. And I just want to emphasize too the purpose. Like I'm trying to go past, I went to the website of Savanna Institute. I said, what's our purpose? We want to catalyze the development and adoption of resilient, scalable agroforestry. And so as I'm starting to do these designs and working with clients, and I think scalable, I want to get beyond niche. I want to get beyond small scale. I want to figure out how can we make this apply towards large scale across the landscape. And so when I'm doing the design, the first questions that I'm thinking is, what is the focus? And when silvopasture is integrated, I'm thinking, well, do we care about the animal or do we care more about the plant? I always want to have these discussions. Don't want to forget these. And after we've had those discussions, I want to do a design for you that's as efficient as possible. I want to make it easy for you to manage so you're successful. If you're not successful with agroforestry, if you're not making a living, selling a product, it's something that can be replicated on somebody else's land. How am I going to grow silvopasture across the country? And that's my presentation. Thank you. Here we have an image of the North Farm. This is a Savanna Institute owned demonstration farm where they are integrating all of the things. So we've got chestnut orchards, we've got hazelnut plantings, and we've got sheep grazing. And it's just a beautiful site in Southwest Wisconsin. If you guys want to contact me, learn more about the Savanna Institute or our technical service program, there's my email. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.